Do you believe in God?
So in the West, there's 2/3 of scientists pray to a personal God on the expectation it will intervene in their day's affairs. But I can tell you this, productive scientists do not bring their Bible, their scripture, their holy books into the lab because they do not mix there. So they draw a line in the sand and they do one in one place, then they worship on the weekend, Saturday or Sunday, whatever is your religious tradition there. So to ask whether they can coexist, the answer is empirically yes.
I didn't ask that. I asked, do you believe in God?
Every description of God that I've heard holds God to be all powerful, very typical, and all good. And then I look around and I see a tsunami that killed 250,000 people in Indonesia, an earthquake that killed 250,000 people in Haiti, and I see earthquakes and tornadoes and disease, childhood leukemia, and I see all of this and I say, I do not see evidence of both of those being true simultaneously. If there is a God, the God is either not all powerful or not all good. Can't be both.
Good answer. My question of the year.
So I'm. If you have good evidence, I'm good for it. But I'm evidence driven.
You need evidence.
More
You're a
than I'm
scientist, yeah.
faith driven.
Yeah. That's good to know.
And by the way, to be faith driven is one thing, but to be faith driven and try to create legislation on that affects other people who don't share your faith,
right.
That's the beginnings of a theocracy. And we have evidence of what that is in the past. And our founding fathers specifically founded this country to prevent that from happening.
Free. Anyway, I read a book, Consolation of Philosophy. The main guy, Boethius, is condemned to death. He has everything taken from him. All he has is his reason and his sense of self. Not even that. But he attempts to console himself to this execution by reasoning that the world has order, that there is something that keeps things together. And he uses his reason to try and get to the root of why he should be at peace at death. The problem is, his source of origin is a belief in God. What would you do?
Well, I don't know if I fully understand the question. I do know that if he's about to be executed.
How about you are about to be executed?
Oh, I'm about to be executed.
You have nothing except your knowledge and your knowledge of science, your experience.
I would request that my body in death be buried, not cremated, so that the energy content contained within it gets returned to the earth so that flora and fauna can dine upon it, just as I have dined upon flora and fauna throughout my life.
People who make this case that was the beginning and that there had to be something that provoked the beginning, do you give them an A at least for trying to reconcile faith and reason?
I don't think they're reconcilable.
What do you mean?
Well, so let me say that differently. All efforts that have been invested by brilliant people of the past have failed at that exercise. They just fail. And so the track record is so poor that going forward, I have essentially zero confidence, near zero confidence that there will be fruitful things to emerge from the effort to reconcile it. So, for example, if you knew nothing about science and you read, say, the Bible, the Old Testament, which in Genesis is an account of nature. That's what that is. And I said to you, give me your description of the natural world based only on this. You would say the world was created in 6 days and that stars are just little points of light, much lesser than the sun. And in fact, they can fall out of the sky, right? Because that's what happens during the Revelation. One of the signs that the second coming is that the stars will fall out of the sky and land on earth. To even write that means you don't know what those things are. You have no concept of what the actual universe is. So everybody who tried to make proclamations about the physical universe based on Bible passages got the wrong answer. So what happened was, when science discovers things and you want to stay religious, or you want to continue to believe that the Bible is unerring, what you would do is, you would say, well, let me go back to the Bible and reinterpret it. then you'd say things like, oh, they didn't really mean that literally, they meant that figuratively. So this whole sort of reinterpretation of how figurative the poetic passages of the Bible are came after science showed that this is not how things unfolded. And so the educated religious people are perfectly fine with that. It's the fundamentalists who want to say that the Bible is the literal truth of God, and want to see the Bible as a science textbook, who are knocking on the science doors of the schools trying to put that content in the science. Enlightened religious people are not behaving that way. They're saying, yes, science is cool, we're good with that, and use the Bible to get your spiritual enlightenment and your emotional fulfillment.
I have known serious religious people, not fundamentalists, who were scared when Carl Sagan opened his series with the words,
"The cosmos is all that is, or ever was, or ever will be."
That scared them because they interpret that to mean that if this is it, there's nothing else, no God and no life after.
For religious people, many people say, well, God is within you, or God, there are ways that people have shaped this, rather than God is an old gray-bearded man in the clouds. So if God is within you, what I'm sure Carl would say, in your mind, and we can measure the neurosynaptic firings when you have a religious experience. We can tell you where that's happening, when it's happening, what you're feeling like at the time. So your mind, of course, is still within the cosmos.
But do you have any sympathy for people who seem to only feel safe in the vastness of the universe you describe in your show if they can infer a personal God who makes it more hospitable to them, who cares for them?
In this, what we tell ourselves is a free country, which means you should have freedom of thought. I don't care what you think. I just don't. Go think whatever you want. Go ahead. Think that there's one God, 2 gods, 10 gods, or no gods. That is what it means to live in a free country. The problem arises is if you have a religious philosophy that is not based in objective realities that you then want to put in the science classroom. Then I'm going to stand there and say, no, I'm not going to allow you in the science classroom. I'm not telling you what to think. I'm just telling you in the science class, you're not doing science. This is not science. Keep it out. That's when I stand up. Otherwise, go ahead. I'm not telling you how to think.
I know you're an avowed atheist. How can you be so certain that there is no supernatural, godlike entity out there, given that we know so little?
Well, first, I don't count myself among the ranks of avowed atheists, and I'll give a fast example why. A friend of mine went up to fix the Hubble telescope, on the space shuttle, and on my Facebook feed, I said, Godspeed to the space shuttle astronauts, and then in the comment thread, it said, I thought you were an atheist. How could you possibly say that? And so the fact that I gleefully said that, and atheists complained about it, clearly I'm not an atheist. Okay?
What are you?
My favorite Broadway musical of all time is Jesus Christ Superstar, which I saw in real time in New York City. I don't know that atheists can, so I don't.
So is there a God then, Neil deGrasse Tyson? I'll be about to have breaking news.
I don't know.
Is there a God?
Okay, so what I will tell you is that there are a lot of unknowns in the universe, but just because there are unknowns does not mean there's a deity in the unknown. If you're going to assign a deity to that which... It doesn't mean there isn't, that's correct.
So you're more of an open mind about this, right?
Everyone should. If the unknown is the unknown. But the track record of people saying God is behind this, and then you add a little science to it and you find out, no, we can completely explain it and control it, then the history of that exercise is so rich with science discovering the unknowns that were previously ascribed to deity, like lightning bolts and weather systems. There was Poseidon, there was Zeus, just look at the history of this. I'm not given reason to say, we're gonna find something, God is gonna be at the center of that, and there'll be no science to apply. I'm gonna look for the science first, because that's how the history of this exercise has unfolded. If you go online and in a Google search, you type God's worshipped by humans. There's a tally of all the gods ever worshipped by humans in the history of civilization. And it just goes screen after screen after screen after screen. So when you say, do you believe in God? Is it which God? Is it Zeus? Is it Poseidon? Is it the Jewish God? Is it the Christian God? Because the Jewish God from the Old Testament is filled with wrath, okay? All right, and smoting and smiting and whatever the past tense verb is. And so, and the New Testament, God is kinder, all right?
A little nicer, yeah.
Yeah, all right. So you look at all of this and you say, is that the God you want me to comment on? Or is there some other God? Typically, it's the Judeo-Christian blend there. In that context, I would say in my studies of the universe, I value evidence, and I don't see evidence for any kind of active intelligence or power over anything.
Yeah.
But if you had evidence, show it to me. I'm all in. In America, 90% of the nation would claim to be religious. And you define this in a way that's unambiguous. You don't say, well, do you go to church every Sunday? You don't ask that question. Plenty of people go to church who are not religious. They go to get a date or so. They go for the cupcakes or something. They don't go to be spiritually enlightened. So you ask a different question. You say, is there a God that listens to your prayers? If you answer yes to that, you're religious by anybody's definition, because your understanding of a deity is that deity is monitoring your daily affairs. So that's unambiguous. This number's dropped in the last couple of years, but it's about 90%. Turns out if you go to college and get an advanced degree, a master's or a doctorate, where these are degrees where you actually question the state of existing knowledge. The undergraduate degree doesn't really do that. You're learning from textbooks that are written by somebody else. Your doctrines are already there. The higher degrees imply that you are questioning the very fabric of the knowledge you had previously learned. Among that community, it's 60%. It has dropped. Well, that's interesting. Let's keep going. How about scientists of all stripes? So biologists, chemists, let's include engineers as well, people who have formal scientific training, mathematicians as well. Okay, what happens next? Drops to 40%. Now, if you look at this number, it looks like, wow, so scientists, the public is 90%, scientists are 40%. No, the drop is not that significant, because every scientist has an advanced degree. So in fact, the drop is not from 90 to 40, the drop is from 60 to 40. So becoming a scientist is not as big an effect on whether you're religious as you might otherwise think. Most of the drop comes because you're educated beyond the level of college. So that's 40%. So now you go to elite scientists, members of the National Academy, highly accomplished subset among scientists, the number drops to 7%. There was a headline in Nature, the British journal Nature, which said, after this study was released, 93% of elite scientists reject God. So that was supposed to be a shocking headline. And I look at that and I said, that's not even interesting. That was the trend line anyway. What's more interesting, which was not the headline, is that 7% of elite scientists pray to a God. Isn't that a more interesting fact to you? Isn't that kind of interesting? The most accomplished scientists in the world in that community, 7% of them still pray to a personal God. I think that is deserving of more study than the 93% who don't. Because something's going on there. We don't know what. And I have confronted people on this. I would say, to the most sort of vociferous in the atheist community, I would say, you're beating the public over the head, telling them, why are you doing it? And I'm thinking, before you beat the public, why don't you beat them over the head, okay? No, I'm just saying, if you're gonna rank, if you just, because you understand that first, because if you can't convert that 7%, you've got no hope in the general public. That's all I'm saying. This is among the ranks. of the scientifically educated. Now, philosophers basically invented atheism. And if you do this, if you check the statistic for philosophers, it's below 1%. There are no the only religious philosophers there are, they're like theologian philosophers, all right? If you subtract the theologic philosophers, this number is essentially zero, all right? So they're basically birthed atheism, the philosophers. And there's this talk, I don't know here in Australia, what does the Bible in the public school class or not? No, is it by law or is it just by tradition? Is it by law? Okay, so in America there's this understanding that the state and the church are separate. And by and large, that's been honored by and large, for most of the history of the country, by and large. And what's interesting about America, a point that was a little bit alluded to earlier today, is that it was founded on the principle that the state has no religion. The state is indifferent to what religion you might have. So that means there's no authority over you that's going to tell you who and what to worship. And that's a state that we all take for granted, but so many places in the world that is not true. Well, there's a case in New Jersey where a middle school kid was lectured to by the history teacher in a public school, and the history teacher said, if you don't accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior, you are going to hell. There's a little Muslim girl there, said you are already damned to hell. First point. Second, that Noah had dinosaurs on his ark. Third point he made is that Big Bang and evolution are just theories and you can take them or leave them. So, I don't, like I said, I don't get into these. I just don't. We got people who do this. We've got the Four Horsemen. We got our boy here who's coming up after. We got people who fight this stuff. I'm not one of those, really. I'm doing this because, like, I know you're all, this is the bone I'm throwing you, but I don't do this. So, but then I thought about it and I said, I have an op-ed, a letter to the editor on this that I can write. And I left out the part about Jesus. I left that out. Because if that's how he feels, he wants you to be Christian, that's okay, fine. I left that out. I went to the rest of what he said. And this was my letter, as it appeared in the New York Times. People cited violation of the First Amendment when that's a separation of church and state, essentially. New Jersey school teacher asserted that evolution and the Big Bang are not scientific and that Noah's Ark carried dinosaurs. The case is not about the need to separate church and state. It's about the need to separate ignorant, scientifically illiterate people from the ranks of teachers. That's the problem. If he wants to believe Jesus is his savior, that's not synonymous with being scientifically illiterate, because 40% of American scientists pray to a personal God. What is identical with being scientifically literate is that if Noah was a human being, he did not have dinosaurs on his ark, because humans and dinosaurs did not coexist, all right? Every one of those scientists knows that, even the 40% who pray to God. So this is how I've sort of split the kingdom there. Then you get the billboard wars. Okay, this was fun. Big Bang Theory. You got to be kidding. God. All right. So this goes on. This is what we put up with. All right. So then then there was like, let's come back. Praise Darwin, evolved beyond belief. Freedom from religion founded. So the billboard wars are in progress here. There's some people who are like okay with God and okay with sort of how things evolve, so they ride the fence. So here's a bumper sticker, the Big Bang Theory, God spoke and bang, it happened, So they're excited about both, God and the Big Bang. But then we had this idiot back in May, Judgment Day. Did this Judgment Day stuff reach below the equator? Jeez, okay. Yeah, it was. Now the good thing, unlike other predictions, like Jesus will come one day, this had a date, okay? You could test it. This was like easy to test. You just sort of wait around for it, all right? So, now it turns out that May 21st was only the day Jesus was supposed to show up. The actual end of the world is October 21st. So the end of the world is still to come this year. This is directly from the website. So I had to tweet. So this was May 21st. So on May 21st or May 20th, I tweeted this. If Jesus actually arrives May 21st, it'll be easy to convince skeptics. If he doesn't show up, do the faithful become atheists? That was my question. Now, in a Twitter stream, it's a live conversation with complete strangers. Everybody depositing their 140 characters worth of thought. So here this is. There was a huge reaction to that tweet. Now, you would expect that most of my followers, or at least a big fraction of them, would be sort of atheistic. So you'd expect people to say, this guy's an idiot, why are we even spending any time on them? Well, one such person did make such a reply, but not in the way you might think. No, anyone who's read the Bible knows this camping asshole was full of shit from the start. Okay. So what do you do with that? So this is somebody complaining about the prediction of Jesus coming because he says this other guy doesn't know jack about the Bible, but this guy does. And went on, there are other places where people quoted that one can't know when Jesus comes. So the fact that this guy's saying he knows means he doesn't read the Bible. So this is what's out there. People who are ready to vociferously argue about who knows the Bible the least. September 11th, 2001, we just had our 10th anniversary of that. I happen to live 3.5 blocks from what became known as Ground Zero. This image was taken outside my dining room window. The North Tower is on fire. These are 110-story buildings, the World Trade Center towers. This image is the instant the South Tower was hit. It was hit from the left. You could not see the entry point because we're blocked by this other black building. It's a hotel, a 50-story hotel, which is just kind of in the foreground. You see part of the South Tower punching out. This is before the jet fuel had ignited. And when you ignite jet fuel, you set a deflagration wave, not a bomb wave. It's a different kind of wave. It's not accompanied by a shock. This is a split second after that, the fuel has ignited, creating more pressure, and within a split second of that, the entire South Tower was engulfed. And this is fragments of plane and bodies and office coming out the other side. Now, why am I dragging you through this? 62 minutes later, both buildings had collapsed. And there was blue sky where there was once these buildings. This is directly outside of my apartment building, and the emergency vehicles had come. This is the pulverized World Trade Center dust that had settled several inches of it. I say this because shortly after this gentleman got up, President of the United States, George W. Bush. This is actually my photo of him. I was in that room at that time when he spoke. See the medals there on the table? I was on a committee to tell him who to give those medals to, the Presidential Medal of Science. And so he actually gave them to everyone we told him to give them to, except he didn't read their citations. He's smart enough to know not to pronounce any of the science words that were in the citation. So he put the medal around the neck, somebody else read the citations. Shortly after September 11th, he gets up, I don't remember where he gave the speech, and he says, in an attempt to distinguish we from they, he says, our God is the God who named the stars. This is before I was on his Rolodex. You know, I could have saved him from himself, okay? It's a loose quote from Genesis that says God named all the stars in the sky, okay? First of all, it's the same God, so he's got that wrong. But Allah, God of Islam, and God of the Jewish God, it's the same God. They call them different names, but it's the same book delivering you the same God. Apart from him getting that wrong, he says, our God is the God who named the stars. What he just didn't know, 2/3 of all stars in the night sky have Arabic names. 2/3 of all stars that have names these are all the Arabic star names. All of these. I don't think this is the point he wanted to make. I just think he figured that out. Like I said, it was before I was on his Rolodex. And so you say, well, how does this happen? How do you get a culture where stars in the night sky are named by them? What was going on? How did that happen? And you have to go back 1,000 years, and you get to Islam in what's the golden period of Islam. In that period, algebra was invented. Algorithm is an Arabic word. All these words, they begin with AL, 10 to 1, it's an Arabic word. Our numerals are Arabic numerals. Did you pause and reflect on why we call them Arabic numerals? We just call them that, right? But somebody did good stuff with these numerals. It was in Baghdad 1,000 years ago where they invented algebra. And there was advances in mathematics, agriculture, engineering, all of these fields. All at a time when Europe was disemboweling heretics. So something changed. 12th century, this gentleman came around, Al-Ghazali, a Muslim scholar, learned. At this point, Islam is maybe just a few hundred years old. People are reading the Quran and interpreting it however they sort of want to and feel like it. There's not a coherence to the practice of Islam until he comes around and codifies the behavior of a good Muslim. In much the same way St. Augustine, in his book Cities of God, codified what it is to be a good Christian. How do you burn the witches? There's a recipe for that. They got to be upside down so the blood does, It's a whole itinerary for how to be a good Muslim. And in his writings contain the assertion that the manipulation of numbers is the work of the devil. 2, actions that you see in nature are the will of Allah. Well, if you drop a stone and it falls, Allah willed that. If that's your explanation, your curiosity stops. You combine everything happening in nature being the will of Allah to the manipulation of numbers being the work of the devil, and the entire enterprise of that golden era collapses. Now, historians, when they look at that era, they say, well, the Mongols came and so historians think of the world in terms of wars and kings. They think less about it philosophically, about intellectual movements or the absence thereof. Islam rose again after this period, didn't have science associated with it. No new inventions in math. You look at the period of Islam in Spain, the period where the great Alhambra was built. There is no attendant science going on there. It's done, it's gone, and it is a cost that exists to this day. There is 1.3 billion Muslims in the world today who are not participants on the frontier of scientific discovery. What's the best measure of this? Just check out the Nobel Prizes. I tallied them, okay? How many Jews have won the Nobel Prize? In the sciences, here they go. 25% of all Nobel Prizes in the sciences are won by Jews. How many Jews in the world? About 15 million, tops? 15 million? How many Muslims in the world? 1.3 billion, which is huger, way huger than 15 million. How many Muslims have won the Nobel Prize in the sciences? 2.5. 2. I can't bring myself to call economics a science. I'm sorry. I just can't. I've tried. I've really tried. I'm sorry. That's how many. And the physics one was a Pakistani physicist not a Middle Eastern physicist. So, Jews have 50 times the number of Nobel Prizes. They're 1/80th of the population of the Muslims. Has 4,000 times the impact. I lose sleep every night wondering how many secrets of the universe lay undiscovered because 1/6th of the population of the world is not a participant on the exploration frontier. What thoughts have gone undreamt of?
All right? This is in response to the people out there who say, oh, Earth is just perfect for life. Oh, what a haven in all the universe, just right. It's not just right.
So this is the,
Every opportunity it gets, it tries to kill us. Add it up. The tsunamis, the hurricanes, the tornadoes, the asteroids, the 3/4 of the Earth. If I drop you butt naked, you're dead 10 minutes later. Because something eats you, okay?
So this is the anti-Gaia hypothesis?
Anti-Gaia, yeah. Earth is bad for life. And evidence of that is, look at the fossil record. 99% of all species that ever lived are now extinct. That is not the signature of a planet that is in love with life.
If I could ask you, if there was one thing you wanted people to remember that you could say about science, what would that be?
That the universe is knowable, and one need not appeal to mystical, magical forces to account for things. Even if a day arises where something unfolds in front of your eyes that you cannot explain, just because you cannot explain it does not mean it is being driven by mystical, magical forces. It just means it's being driven by laws of physics that we know and you have yet to learn, or that we have all yet to discover. But the universe is knowable, and that's an amazing thing. It's knowable by our feeble human brain that rose up out of the Serengeti, the plains of Africa, to rise up just to survive, to not get eaten, and we build a civilization where we have sufficient free time so that we can contemplate our place in the universe.
How could anybody know that there's a heaven, that they're going somewhere, that there's an afterlife? How could anyone know that?
No, they can.
It boggles my mind.
They can believe they know.
Well, but belief is, I could believe that it's raining,
Well,
but
that's
it
right.
ain't.
Well, this is the difference between believing something and using the methods and tools of science to establish what is objectively true. And what is objectively true is something that is true outside of your belief system. That's what science is.
Facts and belief, I know the religious people believe, the scientist says prove. What do you believe? What do you think happens when we die?
Well, so I can make some unassailable statements about what happens when you die. So you spend your life eating food. Food has a calorie content, and calorie is a source of energy. Calorie is a unit of energy. You bring it in, and then the energy is available for you to maintain your body temperature at nearly 100 degrees. It's 98.6. How do you keep something at 100 degrees when nothing else around you is? You're burning energy to sustain that. Because biologically, we need to be at that temperature to function, okay? You also need energy to walk and to move. That's why you eat food. The moment you die, what happens? You don't maintain the energy. Your temperature drops. How far does it drop? To room temperature. At a funeral, in the casket, if you touch the hand of the person in the casket, your first thought is, the body's cold. No, it's not, it's room temperature. But it's cold compared to 100 degrees. They're no longer burning this energy. Okay, so now, every one of your molecules has energy within it. If you get cremated, that energy gets released in the form of heat. And you heat the air, and that air radiates to space. You get buried, which is how I want my body to be disposed of. Bury me. Bury me. Because you know why? I don't want the energy content of my body to just get radiated out into space of no use to anybody. put me in the ground. Let the worms, microbes come in and out of my body. And the energy content of my body that I had assembled over my lifetime, consuming the flora and fauna of this earth, my body then returns to them. And thus is the cycle of life. I know that's going to happen because you can measure where the energy goes. And that's how I want to go out.
But you're not conscious, and that's for eternity, right?
Yeah, there's no evidence that I have any consciousness of anything. And by the way, is that so weird? Did you have consciousness before you were born? Were you saying, how come I'm not on Earth? My gosh, I need to be on Earth. Or where am I? No, there's just the state of non-existence. And so I'm not given any reason.
But now I am born, and I can't stand the thought of non-existence. See, I already have existence. I accept
Okay, it is true. We fear death because we are born knowing only life.
Right.
I get that. However, I take another view because I've been asked, if you could live forever, would you?
Yes.
Okay, we're done with the interview.
Finish the sentence.
Yes. No, okay, sure, that's an attractive idea. But the way I look at it is the knowledge that I'm going to die that creates the focus that I bring to being alive. The urgency of accomplishment. The need to express love. Now, not later. If we live forever, why ever even get out of bed in the morning? Because you always have tomorrow. That's not the kind of life I want to lead.
But why, don't you fear not being around?
I fear living a life where I could have accomplished something and didn't. That's what I fear. I don't fear death.
You don't fear the unknown?
I love the unknown. I love the. You know what I want on my tombstone? My sister has this in her notes, because in case I can't tell anyone after I die. On my tombstone, a quote from Horace Mann, the great educator. Be ashamed to die until you have scored some victory for humanity. That's what I want on my tombstone.
But you don't fear or think about not being around.
My great regret for not being around would be, it would be kind of cool to see my kids continue to grow.
Don't you want to know that?
Yeah, that'd be fun. I want to see what inventions would make life easier, what clever discoveries or innovations would arise out of the collective brainwork of my species.
What do you think when you see religious people, when you see popes or rabbis or people who fervently believe, the Billy Grahams of the world, who are sincere and wonderful people?
Yeah, of course.
Who actually may be delusional that they're going somewhere?
No, they're embedded in belief systems. And what I look at is I see all the belief systems, and when you line them up, they're not really compatible with one another. So whatever they're believing, it can't be a truth that applies to everybody, because other people believe what they do with no less fervor. And so I sit back and, as a person who's interested in objective truths, and I say, well, it doesn't look like that's a path towards an objective truth. So let people continue to think and say what they want. But as a citizen of a country that is not founded on a religion, it's founded with sort of a secular construct in a way that protects whatever religion you want to express. This is protected in the Constitution. The Constitution doesn't actually mention God.
Right.
Rather controversial in its day. And it doesn't mention God because they don't want legislation to tell you what God to worship. They knew this. They knew how governments can persecute people who had belief systems that didn't agree with the state. They knew this. So they created those freedoms. And so we have these freedoms. Go ahead. But if you're going to create legislation that has to apply to everybody, and you're now going to put your belief system into legislation, that is not a free and open democracy.
Don't you sometimes feel sad about breaking all these myths apart?
No, because I think it's some myths are deserve to be broken apart out of respect for the human intellect. That no, when you're writhing on the ground and froth is coming out of your mouth, you're having an epileptic seizure. You have not been invaded by the devil. We got this one figured out, okay? I mean, discovery moves on. So I don't mind the power of myth and magic, but take it to the next frontier and apply it there. Don't apply it in places where we've long passed what we already know what's going on.
I think you must realize that some people are going to go to your show at the planetarium and they're going to say, aha, those scientists have discovered God, because God, dark matter, is what holds this universe together.
So is that a question?
It's a statement. You know they're going to say that.
So the history of discovery, particularly cosmic discovery, but discovery in general, scientific discovery, is one where at any given moment there's a frontier. And there tends to be an urge for people, especially religious people, to assert that across that boundary into the unknown lies the handiwork of God. This shows up a lot. Newton even said it. He had his laws of gravity and motion, and he was explaining the moon and the planet. He was there. He doesn't mention God for any of that. And then he gets to the limits of what his equations can calculate. So I can't quite figure this out. Maybe God steps in and makes it right every now and then. That's where he invoked God. And Ptolemy, he bet on the wrong horse, but he was a brilliant guy. He formulated the geocentric universe with Earth in the middle. This is where we got epicycles and all the machinations of the heavens. There was still a mystery to him. He looked up and uttered the following words: when I trace at my pleasure the windings to and fro of the heavenly bodies. These are the planets going through retrograde and back. The mysteries of the earth. When I trace at my pleasure the windings to and fro of the heavenly bodies, I no longer touch earth with my feet. I stand in the presence of Zeus himself and take my fill of ambrosia. What he did was he didn't invoke Zeus to account for the rock that he's standing on or the air he's breathing. It was this point of mystery, and in gets invoked God. This, over time, has been described by philosophers as the God of the gaps. If that's where you're going to put your God in this world, then God is an ever-receding pocket of scientific ignorance. If that's how you're going to invoke God, if God is the mystery of the universe, these mysteries, we're tackling these mysteries one by one. If you're going to stay religious at the end of the conversation, God has to be more to you than just where science has yet to tread. So to the person who says maybe dark matter is God, if the only reason why you're saying it's because it's a mystery, then get ready to have that undone.
Why does religion have such a persistent hold on human thought despite all that we know of science?
Yeah, I think there are several ways one can address that question. Let me address it in a consider not long ago when so much of the Western world the state was the religion. And we have actually moved quite a distance from that compared with 200 years ago, 300 years ago, 400 years ago, the era of the Inquisition and this sort of thing. And so to say that it has such a grip, it has a fraction of the grip that it once did on the operations of human conduct and of society. So the real question is, if implicit in that is, given what we know of science, why would religion still have any grip at all? Why does it still have a big grip? Because it's not a big grip when you look in the developed world. So, in fact, most of Europe are they're whole countries where religion has essentially disappeared entirely. and the countries are not full of violence, and it's just the assumption that you have to be religious to be moral is a false one. It's empirically false because you just look around in places where that's the case. So that's one fact. And pull away from that a little. There's plenty of what goes on in religious texts that has tremendous value to how to think about life and how to treat one another. In fact, Jefferson created what was essentially what you can think of as Thomas Jefferson, the Jefferson Bible. I don't know if you ever heard of this. He went through the Bible, and I think both the Old and the New Testaments, and he crossed off everything that was sort of mythical, magical, things that clearly violated known laws of nature, and kept the rest, and said, here is the stuff of the Bible that should have value to any modern person going forward. If you look at people who are religious today, who are not in conflict with science, they have viewed their religious text as a spiritual, something that gives them spiritual support, not as a science textbook. The conflict in society is when you have those who are still religious, who want to use their religious text as their access point to understanding the natural world. And persistent efforts of the past to make that happen have just simply failed. The Bible does not work as a science textbook. In fact, Galileo knew this, and he himself was a religious man. He's famously quoted as saying, the Bible tells you how to go to heaven, not how the heavens go. So on that scale, the conflict comes about when that subset of the religious community feels threatened by scientific discoveries that are different from how they interpret what the natural world should be in the Bible.
I think it's that point where you get to the concept of the God of the gaps. You go, we do not understand this, science takes us so far, but we don't understand anything beyond that, therefore, that's God. The stuff that we don't get, that's God. And the trouble with that is the moment that you actually go, no, we do understand that now, is people are going, well, did God just go away then? And it goes back, nice simple things like the rainbow. The point where you go, well, the rainbow actually, it's an optical effect. It's not something magic that gets put up in the sky to memorialize the flood.
Plus, did you know that everyone sees a unique rainbow?
No.
That's right. The rainbow is an optical effect for the person who sees it. So if you stand 10 feet to my left, you see a different rainbow than I see. It's a remarkable, fun fact about rainbows.
My favorite fun fact about rainbows is the fact that they were originally believed to have 6 color bands, but that Newton added indigo and violet.
Yeah, Newton liked
his 7.
The number 7. He had the mystical feeling for the number 7. Throws in indigo that no one else sees.
Yeah, nobody. Hands up here. Who actually goes indigo, violet? There's the indigo. You don't. You just go purple.
Yeah, exactly.
Go blue, purple. But
another thing about the rainbow, because each rainbow is unique to the viewer, it can only be a rainbow that is exactly face on to you. You've never seen a rainbow that was like at an oblique angle. Think about it. They're exactly hemispherical in front of you. That's why you can never get to the base of the rainbow. Because that would mean your perspective on it would change. That's what makes it a good place to hide the gold. Okay? In case you didn't know. All right.
Are you outing yourself here as an unbeliever in leprechauns? People have been burned at stakes for that.
Indeed am. Another thing, you mentioned the God of the gaps. In a free society, a free pluralistic society, where the freedom of the expression of religion is constitutionally protected, which is a fundamental part of why America was so attractive to immigrants from around the world, whose religious differences were not being supported in their hometown. I will never be one to tell you what you should believe or what you should not believe. What I will say is that if you want to say that where we don't understand things, that's where God rests, that's where God operates, the God of the gaps argument, because I get asked that all the time. What was around before the universe? I don't know. Must have been something, God. So they got to stick in God where we're not there yet. And I just say, well, we got top people working on that. It's a current frontier. We're not there yet. And given the history of the moving frontier, where people had previously said, well, God must be operating, we're long past that. Those explanations have come. And so there's no compelling reason to say God did it and then sort of give up and go on to the next problem. My issue with the God of the gaps is that if you feel that way, you should not be writing the science curriculum of a classroom. Okay? That's all. Okay? Because if you do, you are undermining the very process of what science is all about. Because the God of the gaps principle is it's a philosophy of ignorance, whereas science is a philosophy of discovery. And that's an important distinction between the two. And if you remove that foundation for what builds science, you are undermining the capacity of your culture, of your nation, to compete technologically in the 21st century. So it is not without consequence to have conduct of that way. Do I believe in the God that you believe in?
Yes.
Okay, that's probably what I was guessing. Is that the Christian God? Catholic, that'd be Christian. Yeah. Okay, so every time I hear someone say that God, I ask people, what is God to you? They say God is good and God is all powerful. And okay, so then you know what happened? This happened in the 1700s. The city of Lisbon, Portugal. 1755, I think was the year. If I'm off by like 3 years. Lisbon, Portugal, one of the holiest cities in all of Europe. A Catholic city. All Saints Day, one of the holier days in the Christian calendar, back then especially. Everyone was in church, worshiping. That morning, there was an earthquake. And that earthquake, what buildings are most susceptible to earthquakes? The tallest, biggest buildings. And this is 1755, one of the tallest, biggest buildings in Lisbon, the churches. So, that morning, 80,000 people died in their churches from the collapse of the domes, the walls, and what followed the earthquake? Guess what? A tsunami followed the earthquake, basically wiping the city of Lisbon clean. Okay? That was the beginning of what we today think of as the modern atheist movement. Because at the time people said, if God is all loving, how could he have possibly done this? God presumably controlling the forces of nature. We're not talking about man's inhumanity to man here, which would be the consequence of free will. We're talking about nature. And so people at the time, led by people such as Voltaire, asked the question, if there is a God, and we had this tsunami that killed 80,000 people and wiped out a holy city on a holy day, collapsing churches onto people's heads, then either God is not all powerful, or God is not all good. If we define good by being interested in your health and longevity, that's a fair definition of being good, I would think. And so that created an entire philosophical rift in the theological community, and people parted ways at that time. So when I look at the universe and I see asteroids coming down to strike and rendering species extinct, I see forces of nature that would just as soon have us dead or extinct. I don't see the goodness in the world that people speak of. And am I being selective? I don't think so. A tsunami hit Indonesia, 250,000 people died. An earthquake hit Haiti, 250,000 people died. This is nature killing us. I've joked about it. I said, another earthquake comes, we should get the hint that Earth is trying to shake us off. You ever see a dog like shake after it's wet? It's like, Earth, say, get off. Humans, listen. So, when people define God in that way, I don't see the all good part. I see some good, I see a lot of bad. Nature trying to interrupt my health and my longevity. So now, that being said, nearly half of all scientists are religious. They pray to a God, half of all Western in America. So being a scientist does not make you not believe in God. Nearly half. Here's the difference. The scientists who are productive, who are also religious, do not use the Bible as their science reference. The Bible, they've removed and they use the Bible as a source of their spiritual fulfillment and enlightenment. And they draw a line in the sand. And Galileo said this first. Galileo, a religious Catholic man in Italy, he said it first. He's reading the Bible, and but then he invents a telescope. He builds a telescope, best one ever. And he's looking at the universe, and he said, this doesn't match up. And so he comes up with the phrase, a brilliant phrase, in a letter to a friend of his. He said, apparently, the Bible tells you how to go to heaven, not how the heavens go. So he drew the first line in the sand between how you might relate to your religion if you're going to live in a physical reality. And so my issue has never been about religion and society. I never talked about it. I mentioned it historically and what forces interplay. But we live in a free society where we tell ourselves that. And our Constitution is written in such a way that the government can't tell you what religion to be. You can be whatever religion you want. And you know what guarantees that? It's because our Constitution, ratified in 1789, makes no mention of God at all. A controversial fact at the time. How could you found a country with no mention of God? It's because the founding fathers were afraid that if a government establishes a God, that you will not have the freedom of religion that the Constitution promises. So the only way to guarantee that is to remove God from the Constitution altogether. Actually, God appears there in a trivial way. There's one mention of God, but it's not in any way that you would think. Did you know where it appears in the Constitution? Yes, it did. It's Anno Domini 1789. That's where it's God in the Constitution. So my point is that so because of that, so you have the freedom to worship whatever you want. Now here's where the rubber hits the road.
I have to go.
Oh, okay. Since you are our future, I want you to understand something and not forget it. Are you ready? Okay. Religions all over the world constitutes what we call belief systems, okay? And your freedom to believe whatever you want is a right and even a privilege in a free society. That's a good thing. Consider, however, that if you believe something that's part of a religious philosophy, and someone else has a different religion that's a different religious philosophy, and you're not agreeing with one another, there's another religion over here and another over here, and they don't agree, you're still free to believe what you want. But what that tells you is that it is unstable to build a government on a belief system. What you want is objectively verifiable truths around which we can all agree. That's what you build your economic system on, your governance on.
Once you have that, then you go forth to your mosques, to your churches, and to your cities. Go forth and preach and believe whatever you want. But know the difference, as Galileo did, between how to go to heaven and how the heavens go. That's my answer to